Hi, I'm Pat Giles, and you're watching a podcast where nostalgia comes alive. It's Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Roll it!
Welcome to Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, the podcast where nostalgia comes alive. Since July of 2021, Jake and his friends have interviewed professionals in the worlds of acting, directing, writing, puppeteering, and many more. Who will they be chatting with in this week's interview? Find out in this Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show episode.
Hey everyone, welcome to this episode of Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show, where nostalgia comes alive. Happy to be here with us as always. I'm your host, Jake Deffinbaugh. With me today, as always, co-host Chris Bixby, and Matt Bingel with his pal, Mario Monster. How you guys doing?
Good.
Doing good.
I'm not usually here for these non-puppet interviews, but since I know our guests quite well, I thought I'd be here. Yay! How you doing, Jakey?
I'm doing great as always. Thank you for asking. Mari, Chris, what do we have for today?
Very excited about today's guest. He created shows such as Doug, PB&J Otter, JoJo Circus, a whole bunch of other things that we'll talk about. And here he is, Jim Jinkins. Happy to have you here, Jim.
Hello, how are y'all doing?
I'm doing great.
Doing
Thank you
great.
for asking.
Doing
How about
great.
you?
Great. It's just we're having
Awesome.
a beautiful day here in the mountains, and my lovely wife and I just got off of a beautiful, 2.5 hour hike that was perfect, so I'm gushing about and on a high there for doing that. But things are good.
Good.
Definitely.
That's good.
Good to hear.
Where are you guys? Where are you?
Well, Chris lives in Massachusetts, and me and Matt and Mark, both of us were actually like an hour and 30, an hour 45 minutes away from each other.
No, it's shorter than that. We're both in
Really?
Maryland. I'd say maybe about an hour. I'd say about an hour away from each other. Pretty close.
Huh.
Yeah, so to
Yes.
start this off, so for those who don't know you, could you tell our audience a little bit about yourself and what you do?
Well, my career life, so that I don't just prattle on forever, is I make cartoon shows for kids, and have done that. And me and a bunch of other amazing creators and producers and whatever made a lot of shows for kids, for Nickelodeon, for Disney, for Children's Television Workshop, and on mainly during the 90s, although many of our shows are still airing, which is so exciting to see stuff reemerge. Disney Plus has put up both the Doug stuff and the PB&J Otter and the 101 Dalmatian series that we did. So, it's nice to know that this stuff still lives and is available.
Definitely.
Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Indeed. So prior to becoming an animator and cartoonist, how did you grow up, and what was your childhood like?
Um, I would describe my childhood in some ways, because I forget maybe some of the rough parts that any kid goes through.
Right.
It was idyllic. I mean, we lived in an era before computers took off. And so we had to occupy our time in the woods and play outside and all kinds of things. And I'm not anti-computer, by the way, but I'm just saying we were really left to our own imaginations to go and do stuff. And I think that's sort of the beginning of making up stories and living in a place I lived at the end of suburbia, and then it opened up into farmland. And so we could play touch football or go on Halloween, trick or treating in the neighborhood, or you can go this way and be lost in the woods, herding Mr. Bowles, the farmer's cows, to his consternation, or I don't know, just getting into all kinds of mischief. It was dreamy for me, I think.
Nice.
So in terms of suburbia, you would at least when Matt's mom grew up, you pretty much played until the street lights came on. Mm-hmm.
That's true, except we didn't even have street lights.
No,
It
didn't have
was
street lights.
yeah, it was really this part of it was Richmond, Virginia, and this part of it was new. It was wheat fields. before it became Suburbia. And it was in that transition during childhood. And we played, we did all the stuff kids do, even today, ride bikes around the neighborhood and do all that. I mentioned Halloween because it was magical. It was your parents went, bye-bye, have fun. And, when off you went into the dark, for whatever. So let's say 2 hours, and collected enormous amounts of candy and saw your friends and all. It was a different vibe in some ways. I know some small communities still have that. We had that a little bit in a small town up in New York, but it's not the same for a lot of folks. So anyway, that was pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool. So before launching your career in animation, you acted in the 2 earliest Nickelodeon series, Pinwheel and Hocus Focus. We're going like technically pre-Nickelodeon here for
Yes.
Pinwheel. Technically speaking, yes. Could you talk a bit about those?
Yeah. First of all, the fact I giggle because it's like, wait, how do you know that? It's pretty that's some pretty great detail that you know that. And I will say, if this goes on too long, forgive me. But when people try to figure out how did you know what it was you were going to turn out doing and all of that, I'd say I was clueless. But I will say things happened that now I look back on that really were clues. For example, when I was in high school, a new show came out, and in my day, there were 3 channels of regular TV and UHF. And this new show was being talked up by, I heard about that. I thought, I want to see this. It's not made for my age, but I want to check it out. And I liked it. It was great. It was on that UHF channel. And I loved it because it had cartoons and it had some live actors, of course, but it had these puppets. And there were 2 puppets in particular named Bert and Ernie. I just loved them. I thought they were so funny and great. And that was a moment of, now that's what I want to do. And of course, Sesame Street, I need not, explain, but to have that happen that early on is pretty cool. It didn't, I didn't go off to the big city right then and there. That, I was a kid, but it was a thing that kind of got me informed my path. But by the time I got to graduate school, I decided I wanted to focus. I wanted to learn animation. So I was in Columbus, Ohio, at the Ohio State University, working on a master's at the School of Photography and Cinematography. And lo and behold, Columbus happens to be a test market for a lot of stuff. Like the Wendy's went there to get started because they figured it's a good test market. And Warner Communications thought this would be a good place to start this thing called Cube, spelled Qube, which was moving from 3 channels, like I said, to 30, mind blowing, and it would be interactive. You could actually press buttons and participate in stuff. And one of those channels was dedicated to preschool kids, and it was called Pinwheel. And so Pinwheel was its own original show for Cube, made by Warner Communication, that played day and night, And
Right.
those executives had come from New York. They had worked on Sesame Street and the Electric Company. They go back to New York after they were done, leaving me marooned in Ohio. But they decided to make a channel. And it would have Pinwheel on it, of course, but it would have all kinds of programming and really become a network, and they called it Nickelodeon. So I just happened to be at the right place at the right time to fall into Pinwheel, and working with one of the brilliant creators, Brad Williams. George James was the other one, we became great friends. But Brad needed help with the puppets, and I went, I'll do it, I'll help. And so he let me do the second hand on the big characters like Ebenezer Squint. And then he had these 2 characters kind of like Bert and Ernie, called Plus and Minus. And he said, "You want to be Minus?" And I was like, what? And so I got to do that character on the show. So it was sort of a dream come true. This is me in my mid-20s. So I'm just a hapless kid bouncing into a dreamy situation.
Yeah, I can imagine. Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
It's
definitely.
hard for me to imagine that it happened now. It's a long time ago, but it's also a wonderful beginning that moved me out of my world into coming to New York City. And right as cable exploded. So there was stuff going on in every direction. And of course, that led to went down the line a little bit to Nicktoons and on and on. But anyway.
Right.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So in 1990, you founded the animation studio Jumbo Pictures with David Campbell. Now, how did the two of you come together to develop Jumbo Pictures?
Well, it's really a story of Doug, because that was our first thing. And backing up into while I was working on other people's shows, mostly kids shows, I had a little teeny studio. It's New York City, so I had a tiny little apartment, and so you have your bed here, and up above it you build this platform. Well, the bed's up here, and then down here is your drawing table and all your art stuff. And I would climb up into my loft bed, and I had pencil and paper and doodle at night. And that really was not a planned thing. It just evolved into these single panel cartoons each night that kind of was my way of expressing where I was at. And out of that became this character that kept showing up in my drawings that I call Doug. And I showed those cartoons and some other drawings to David Campbell because he was my friend, and he was more in Broadway type theatrical stuff for the live theater. But we were good friends. We hung out, we did all that kind of stuff. And I showed him all of that I described. And he said, you should make that into a book. And I thought, that's a good idea. I'm going to do that. So I grabbed my writer friend, Joe Aaron, and the two of us worked on a story, and I worked up this thing. And because I thought I didn't know what you were going to ask today, but I thought you might ask that question. And so I happen to have right here, this is what I'm talking about. That is the original,
Wow.
Wow.
King Code. This is
Uh,
it. This is what I made. There's the characters. The main
Oh, wow.
yeah,
So
there
even
they
from the
are.
beginning,
Oh my
you might
gosh.
see some familiar stuff.
Right. Yeah, I see Doug and
Yeah,
Pork
yeah.
Chop and Quail
Pork
Man.
chop,
Yeah.
patty,
Yes.
But this is I'm talking about the very beginning of taking this and taking it to book publishers in New York City, and nothing was happening. You get so discouraged, and everyone said, good luck, kid, but we're not interested, that kind of thing. And then a phone call came from a friend of mine I had worked on a pilot for a game show with. Her name is Linda Shupak. And if you knew me, anybody that knew me knew about Doug. And because I'm just talking it up because I'm thinking about this, right? So she called me and went, Nickelodeon just announced they're doing these looking for creator-driven original ideas to make animation with. They're going to call it Nicktoons. Get over there. And I just went, okay, thanks for calling. And called over there and made a meeting with the head person at Nicktoons. Her name is Vanessa Coffey. And we're just sitting in the room with this. This is what I walked in with. And I'm explaining who this guy is and what it's a setup. I haven't really gotten into what was getting ready to go on with Doug's imagination and all that stuff. And as I was doing all that, she got up out of her chair and ran out of the room, which is disturbing.
Yes.
You're like, so hey, what happened? And she told me later to explain herself. She had run down the hallway to her boss and said, she said later, I saw this guy and I saw this guy. And, and she came back in to this first meeting and went, you're going to pilot. Now, you know, who does that? Vanessa's a very special person to me and life-changing person to me. And so in 1990, New Yorkers, people I knew from making short animation for MTV, for commercials, you know, for the ad agency world, we came together. And this is where I met Melanie Grisanti, Tony Eastman, Michael Zadarozny, Bruce Knapp, and of course it was David and me. All those are names that play on the credits of our shows, but they were New Yorkers, and we made this little film. John Dilworth is the other one. We made this little 8-minute film called Doug Can't Dance. And when Nickelodeon tested it, along with their other pilots, it tested, by their telling of it, it tested higher than any of them. And we got picked up for a series, which now finally gets me to Jumbo, because I said, I don't know what gave me this moment of wisdom, but I said, we'll make this show for you. But and Nickelodeon did not have an animation studio at that time. I said, we'll do it, but let us be the production house and we'll be independent of you, but we exist to make Doug for you. What do you say? And again, they said yes. Now that's, wow, you know, just amazing.
Right.
And so Jumbo Pictures existed to service that agreement with Nickelodeon, Nicktoons, to make Doug. That's how we got started.
Nice.
Wow.
That part of, you know,
That's
that
awesome.
every time I get to tell that, I'm like, really? That happened? Cool. It's just amazing.
Right?
Yeah.
That's like us with this show, you know, the guests we've had on.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
you mentioned Sesame Street. We've had a ton of their puppeteers on our show.
Oh,
in the
wow.
Yeah.
past.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you know, there are times where we're like, did we like
Do we talk
doesn't
to them?
feel
Yeah.
real. Did we talk to them?
About
Like,
a month
it's-
ago, I went to see a show by one of the writers from our shows now is touring a puppet show, and the puppeteer is this is Annie Evans. Her husband is
Oh,
yes.
Marty Robinson,
Yes.
and,
Yes.
and he was
Previous
there.
guest.
And when they
Yes,
were
they're
finished, you
great.
know, and we were walking toward each other. We haven't seen each other since Allegra's window, I don't guess. But it was
Oh,
bugs and wow, and we got to relive some moments from Allegra's window, and it's like you just described. It just, you can't hardly believe it's happening, you know.
yeah.
Yeah. Annie and Marty are good friends of ours too. We previously had them on our show, and
Yes.
they're wonderful
And-
people.
Oh yes, they're
And Marty
wonderful.
made a cameo appearance on Annie's episode too.
Yeah. Right.
Mhm.
Yes.
Yeah.
He's like,
Yeah,
oh, these
they're-
guys.
These
great
guys,
people.
they are.
Yes.
They're amazing people.
Yes.
All the Sesame people we talked to are amazing.
Yes.
But yeah,
Yeah,
they're
so.
really amazing people. We've had so many, I can't even remember them all. No worries. Let's see.
I know.
Mentioned we
Or
had
Leslie
Marty and
Carey
Annie on,
Rudolph,
Leslie Carrera Rudolph, Abby
Jennifer
Caddy,
Barnhart.
I love Jen Barnhart. Carmen Osbar, who does Rosita.
Yes.
Just so many.
Yeah.
Even some of the newer ones who are good friends of ours, like
Yeah. Mhm.
Sebastiano Ricci, who's currently doing. I don't know if he's still currently doing, but he's doing directing the Winnie the Pooh show in Australia.
Yeah. Brandon Smith,
think
Bradley
still
Freeman
is,
yeah.
Jr., Chris Thomas Hayes.
A lot of the new,
a lot of people.
A lot of the new ones are good friends of ours too.
Oh yes.
Just amazing, you know.
Yeah.
And even it's like, did we really talk to them? It's like, did we?
Right.
It doesn't feel real. It still doesn't. We've been doing this show 2 years. It still doesn't feel real for some of them.
Yeah, and
Right.
you know,
Not at all. Not at all.
and me and Matt and Mari, and we actually went like in 29th of July. We actually, like last month, we actually saw
Yeah.
each other for the first time in person.
Yeah,
Let's
we
see.
met in person for the first time, and it was just with a couple of our other puppet friends that were really good
The
friends
Maryland
with.
Center for History and Culture to went to Jim Henson exhibit, and it was.
I had the
amazing.
shortest drive.
Yeah.
Yeah, we had the shortest
It
drive.
was
It was
wonderful.
surreal. Like, it was very surreal. Like Jake and I have been friends for how long now? 3 years.
I think almost 3
Just,
years.
just over 3 years, and it didn't feel real that we met in person. It still
Yeah.
doesn't, and that was like 3 weeks ago. Like it was
Right? Yeah.
Yeah.
just
Yeah,
so
four of us
surreal.
have that,
Really.
circle of that moments,
Right.
Just kind of funny.
It's a small circle, but a bigger circle at the same time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Absolutely. Uh, yes. So, because you mentioned earlier, Doug was one of Nickelodeon's first Nicktoons. How does it feel that your creation played a huge part in launching what is now a huge brand?
Well, in one sense, it falls into the same category that we just went through of it's kind of hard when you put it out just in front of your face that way. It's kind of hard to imagine in a way. I feel in a way like Doug's like this real guy and we're good friends and we just hang out, But to be a part of the first wave, with Rugrats and Ren and Stimpy was a moment in time like catching lightning in a bottle. It's just wonderful to be a part of. I will say, what do I want to say? I never felt like me or the Doug universe was a perfect match for what Nickelodeon wanted to be. And that might be a lot of, or at least behind why it ended up moving over to Disney. Because in some ways, the what would you call it? Just sort of the core of what you want to say to kids and all that started feeling more. I felt more comfortable or in sync, let's say, with Disney. And so I'm glad it had that start. Really glad, but they were done. They were finished with Doug, and I was so happy that Disney picked it up and let it have that life beyond.
Definitely.
Absolutely. So I'm kind of curious, do you have any favorite Doug episodes?
Yes. Would you like me to tell you about it?
Yeah, of course.
Yes. Because there are a
Sure.
lot. Because there are a lot of good ones.
I know I do, but you know what? I have a favorite one from Nicktoons, and then another one that's my favorite from Disney. And I don't know how familiar you are with the episodes, but there's a certain rhythm to the storytelling of Doug. Normally, you catch Doug. Maybe we come up in an imagination thing, or maybe it's just Doug in normal life, but it leads to a problem. He typically picks the wrong path. He makes the wrong decision, and it's disaster. What are we going to do? Oh no! Will everybody think? And then through whatever means, things are brought to him that help him solve that problem, figure it out, and ultimately do the right thing. That's a good, structural explanation for a Doug. But I wanted to do a show that was different, very different from the others. We had a lot of words in our show, and a typical script was about 23 pages long, something like that. And I wanted one with less words, more air, more time to let this thing be more lyrical and whatever. And I wanted the music to play a much bigger role. And so a show called Doug's Lucky Hat,
Oh yeah.
which
That's a good one.
really came from us finally, Lisa and I, my wife and I, getting away for a vacation, which was, we were in the middle of production. So that was hard to pry away to do. But we went to this place, and it happens to be the kind of place where families show up with their kids, and you're put in situations where you're sitting at long tables, family style, and you see each other over and over again. And there was one kid who kept showing up there that was about Doug's age, and he had this tattered old baseball hat that he wore. And you could tell almost immediately, and certainly as the week went on, that he never took it off. This was his special hat, his signature or whatever. And it was blue. The cap part was blue, and the bill part was red. And I just came back from that trip with that image in my head and thought, that's his lucky hat. And so that's sort of the driver of letting a hat literally blow into Doug's life and try to make sense of it and what does it represent. And for a while there, he thinks it makes him lucky things start happening for him that are really great. And he attributes it to the hat, and eventually gets to where he's wearing it so much, he's wearing it in the shower and all these silly things. And then it plays out at the end by way of Patty, who is adorable, but also pretty wise for her age. Talked about how special she thinks Doug is as her friend, with or without the hat. And so Doug learns this little simple idea that things come and go out of your life. They may blow on, but along the way, you hold on to your friends and the people you love. And so we made that show, and Fred Newman and Dan Sawyer made a beautiful thematic piece that winds its way through it. That's got this sort of Irish lilt to it, and I find it just beautiful music. And naturally, the house, our production house we made these as a tribute
Oh,
to Doug's
nice.
Lucky
Wow.
Hat. We put our
That's
logo.
awesome.
That was a Doug's Lucky Hat right there. But I don't know. That's a special show, from the Nicktoon days.
Yeah, one of my favorite episodes, also from the Nickelodeon version, is the Christmas episode.
Yes, me
That's
too.
a really special one.
Yes.
Yeah, I watch it
Uh-huh.
I watch it every year.
Yep, so do we. And that's Ken Scarborough, his brilliance. And to take that structure that kind of comes out of It's a Wonderful Life and other, sort of old movies that we have become classics, and it was made in that style. And oh my goodness, it's so fun, and in a way, super high stakes for a kid to watch, like your dog. What is going to happen to Pork Chop? But it's silly along the way. I love
Yeah,
that show. Good call.
definitely. So you mentioned in 1996, Doug was shopped over to Disney for an additional 2 seasons. What was it like working on the Disney version versus the Nickelodeon one?
Well, we were thrilled that Disney had just acquired ABC, and so they were in need of programming. And Saturday morning, they wanted to sort of retake Saturday morning, which was sort of in that back then, that was sort of the kids' world. And so they were creating one Saturday morning, and wanted animation to go, series to go in there. And Doug had a momentum. Doug was doing very well, and they were able to see it and see what its potential was. And so they bought our company, lock, stock, and barrel. But I think at the top of that was their ability to put that right into the one Saturday morning block and use it in that way. But it also, for me, as Doug's creator, they said to me, what is it? What do you want? How do you want this to play? Now, that again is a very rare thing for creative executives at a network to say to you. Usually it's, here are your notes, and you're not going to do that again. And it's a lot of where there's pushback and there's argument and all that. It didn't start that way. It was, how do you envision this working? And so people that watched the two, Nicktoons and Disney, it's not uncommon to hear, oh, look how Disney ruined Doug, and all that stuff that you might hear, you may have run across. If that was me, I was trying to and wanted to make Doug feel different from what we'd already done. And yet, of course, it's the same world, but I wanted it to feel different. So we told
Right.
one story per half hour. And then we made all those little changes. We lead at that first show, if you recall, with Doug's 9 stringy hairs that are shoulder length, and he's off to get a haircut. But Patty got a haircut, and they all have slightly different clothes. Roger Klotz and his family got filthy, stinking rich, which creates a whole different way that jokes play with Roger and his obnoxious ways. So, but anyway, it was fun for the writers and us to come at Doug from a slightly different place, and I enjoyed making them.
Nice.
That's awesome. So on the subject of the Disney version, what's it like working on Doug's first movie?
We were making a back in those days, VHS tapes that you could go to Blockbuster or whatever and rent. That was a
Yeah.
big industry. And there was
Oh,
a
yeah.
big call
Absolutely.
for content to get on the shelves. And so we were called on, just like a lot of people were, and Disney asked us to make a direct-to-video movie of Doug. So we had started, I mean, more than started, we were months and months and months into developing a movie for direct-to-video. And by that, I'm saying it's going to play on a TV, it's a very different set of considerations to a big screen. And just production value wise, it's really like a more elaborate version of what your TV show is, which is just a slight different thought than if it goes theatrical in a big theater. And then Michael Eisner came to visit us. He and Joe Roth came to visit our studio in New York, which we love because they're out in LA. And we thought, you haven't seen our studio, come visit. They did. And while at our studio, and everyone's all excited and everything, Michael Eisner says, I got good news for you. And I'm like, what? He goes, yeah, Doug's first movie is going to go theatrical. To which we all went, just what? We didn't dream of that being the possibility. And he had said, they had talked about how some of their kids had seen it and loved it. By then Doug's first movie was it had been animated. I mean, it had gone overseas and it had been animated. We were in post-production on it. What that means is we were coming in for a landing, and now they're saying you're going to go theatrical. So after fainting, because that's an amazing opportunity,
Of course.
we got up and then fainted again because how?
Like, how is this happening?
How is it happening? But how is it going to be possible to take this tiny little thing and make it work?
Exactly.
And technically speaking, even a thing like a pan of a shot, if you're going this big across it, there's a certain frame rate and way you can do that. And you blow that up this big and it's lag. It doesn't look right. And we were all like, and they saw that and they were like, relax, we're here for you. And that was true. That now we began to witness what coming into Disney's wheelhouse, the thing arguably they do the very best, and that's make animated movies. And they worked on identifying the scenes that had to be reshot, to make them work. They brought in a person to take the music that had been composed by Dan Sawyer and Fred Newman, but to convert it into orchestration, a vastly bigger thing. And they brought in someone to do that, and many other things. And it was all mixed in LA on the big screen. Everything was done the way you make a feature film. And so they helped us, and more than helped us, they made it happen. And one detail of that was for David and I to walk into where a full orchestra, which means 50 players and a conductor, and then they project the scene and the conductor hits the thing. It was a moment that is hard to convey. It gave us goosebumps on our goosebumps, and we had our phones up, so that our wives at home could see what was going on and hear it. So it was an exciting, wonderful time. And I don't know. I'm glad we got to make it, and it did just fine, as a commercial thing. So and it's available now. You can watch it on Disney Plus.
Nice.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yes. So after Doug, we technically after the Nickelodeon Doug, technically speaking, you created a show for Nick Jr., which we mentioned earlier, Allegra's Window. Oh yes. What was that show like? I know we had brought up Marty Robinson earlier and all that. What was it like working with these amazing people?
Well, we were not making any more Dogz for Nickelodeon, and we came to them saying, "Help us. What can we do?" You know, we were a studio now. We thought we had at least another year and a half minimum of things to make, and they said, "We'll develop a show for preschool." And so a woman named whose name is Jan Fleming Candler, who was working with our company, started working with a guy from the outside, a guy named John Hoffman, and the two of them, and then I got pulled in, and the three of us really started creating this world, you know, the Allegra's Window world, which in some ways has parallel roots to Sesame Street, in the sense that it had a street setting and various places you can go along that street. And it's a very musical show, and a combination of live actors and puppets. And of course, Marty, we knew Marty, and he's brilliant, not just at being a puppeteer, but at knowing who to bring in, because he knew that world. And he's also a puppet designer. So what I could do is draw the characters in that very flat style that I draw in, and he could see it. He could see how to transfer that into his puppet designs and get them made. And so you're right. What you said is just, it was a brilliant cast of people, and it was exciting to make. We shot it down in Florida. By now, Nickelodeon had studios for live action in Florida, and that was part of the incentive. They have a studio. They need to keep productions going in there, and it happened to have a tour that came across on this up way up high in this studio grid. You could see them walking, and there's a sheet of glass separating us, so there's no interruptions. But it was exciting to do that. It was very different from anything we'd done, like in making Doug. So as a company, it was good for us.
Definitely. So, and how would you kind of compare, working on a series with puppets to working on an animated series?
Well, with animation, in production, a lot of what production of anything is about solving problems, let's call it. Another way to say it more dramatically is it's about putting out the fires. That if you have a little problem here in animation and you don't fix it immediately, it cascades into a massive catastrophic problem down the road. Because if you've got a show coming down the pipeline, you've got another one right behind it, and another one behind that one, and all that. That's what I mean. You just got like a car wreck on the interstate. They just start piling into each other. So in animation, you really have to have producers that are not just living in the moment, putting out the fires. They've got to look at where things are going and where are they at. With live action, there's a little bit of that as well. But you can fix certain things immediately. If you don't like a scene, it's not working right, you can huddle and talk to the performers and whatever. What can we do, and how can we make that really work well? And let's rehearse that and let's go for it. When it's animation, you got to redraw it, and then you got to design it, and then you got to ship it to Korea, and that team has to animate it, and on and on and on. So it's just a different style to it, but it's more dynamic. Things can happen in the moment, much closer to what doing a live action thing with live actors is. That there can be an immediate change that can get you on your right track. So yeah, it's exciting.
Definitely.
Absolutely. You had brought up the Nickelodeon Studios tour. I think somebody else did they not? Yes, Cheryl Blaylock did. She worked on Eureka's Castle, which was filmed at Nickelodeon Studios for season 2.
Yep.
Also previous
there
guest.
there was one story about that. I can't remember. It was so long ago that we had her on, about almost a year ago. I don't remember too much about it, but I think if I remember correctly, there was this there was this tour walking through, like you said, through a glass, and I think there was this little girl who just loved Eureka. It's like, and it's like I can't remember exactly. Um, Mind if we put this in post, like the flashback? If you want to, we haven't done a flashback in a while. Uh, Hey, Post, you mind playing that flashback? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. If you want to, I don't care. But yeah, it was this little girl, and I don't know how old she was, but she loved Eureka, and I think they let her go down there and meet Eureka, which was really
Oh,
sweet. I think
yeah.
does that sound
Yeah,
about
that's
right?
right.
Yeah.
Yes.
Never mind about the flashback. Never mind about that. Uh, no, it brought back that wonderful story. A lot of shows were from the Nickelodeon Studios.
Yeah. Oh
Mhm.
yeah.
Universal Studios, Orlando, Florida. Yep, you got it.
Yeah,
uh,
the
Absolutely.
Legos window, amazing,
Rutgers
amazing
Window, a
show.
lot of wonderful shows filmed down there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wish it was still around. Mhm.
Yeah, yeah. I remember like Cheryl said, like where like in the studio it's like so like it's like kind of cold, but then when it came outside,
When you came
of the
outside, it
studio,
was
it's
so
like
warm. Yeah.
it's so hot.
Yes.
There were lots of
Uh,
game shows done there.
mhm.
Right.
Okay.
Yes.
Yep.
Um, what are they? I was trying to rattle them off. There was one that had in sort of this temple.
Oh, Legends of the Hidden
Legends of the
Temple.
Hidden Temple.
Yes,
Yeah, that was a
Yes,
great
that
show.
was great.
that set was still up, and we just went in there and just like, it is does not disappoint. It's awesome. It was just great.
Wow,
Mm-hmm.
that's
Definitely.
amazing. So now going back to animation, what's it like getting to work on the 101 Dalmatians, the series?
Um, w- uh, this was early on in working at Disney, and we're of course focused on getting Doug up and on its feet as a production, and we're looking for that next thing that we could do. And this is me talking up a show that I was wanting to create for them called PB&J Otter. But right before that, our boss, the guy that brought us in, Dean Valentine is his name, he just casually on a visit one time, we were out in LA and we were having lunch or whatever together, and he goes, "What do you think of 101 Dalmatian?" And I went, "Love it." It was my favorite show as a kid. When I don't in the 1960s, maybe, whatever, when it
Right.
came out. I thought I loved it. It was just, I love that story. I like the look of that movie and all that. And I said, "I love it." And he goes, "Great. I want you to figure out how we can make that a series. And I need you to do it fast." And we came to learn, well, first of all, that's another one of those, what? But
I didn't know
Yeah.
it was coming.
they had Disney had an agreement about a launch of the Happy Meal toys at
Mhm.
McDonald's. They knew they were gonna do this series, and they were on their way on that track to release toys, but they had not yet figured out the show and how that would work. And so I just went back and watched the movie again, and I read the original book that it was that inspired the movie. And what you do is you learn that there's stuff in the book, like a cute little puppy named Cadpig, sort of the runt of the litter. And that's became a major character in the TV series. But it's just an example of how once you start digging into what's going on with 101 Dalmatians, all kinds of fun little things come out. And of course, Cruella is one of the best bad guys there are. I mean, she's so funny and over the top. And it was a chance for me and David Campbell as executive producers to work in LA with the Disney animators and directors and that team. So this is a whole new work pool that we're getting to know. And so we were able to go back and forth between the studios, but it was a whole new experience, and we learned a lot making that series.
Definitely. And I know you just briefly mentioned PB&J Otter, which was also one of my favorite shows as a kid. How was that created?
Well, when we came into Disney, I had this idea for a show that we'd actually Nick Jr. was talking to me about, and we were trying to get going with these little puppies. It was really super cute, simple idea, and they had not picked it up. It looked like it wasn't going to necessarily take off, but that is just about timing. It was about that time in the timeline that I went over to Disney, and so I talked to them about it and showed them what I was doing, and they liked ideas from it. So we took sort of that basic idea. I thought, well, I'm gonna go with otters. I mean, who doesn't love otters? And so we changed it to otters and put the whole setting on Lake Hoo-Ha, and then it was another case of where we just had a lot of leeway to figure that out and tell it. It was at a time when my wife Lisa and I had our first kid, who's a little baby running around in diapers. So Baby Butter in that series is clearly a because we have a little 2-year-old maybe running around the house, and you can't help but be inspired by that. And I think maybe PB&J may be our best show because we had made Doug. We knew I'll always emotionally think of Doug as the best, but as far as understanding what you're doing and how to get there and who's going to help you get there in terms of your studio, we were up and running. We knew how to do it. So it was a good experience, very good experience.
Definitely.
Yeah.
Yep. Similarly with Doug, do you have any favorite PB&J Otter episodes?
I just screened one yesterday
Oh wow.
because we're just a few months out from the holiday season, and we had played the holidays pretty much as Christmas with the Doug series.
Hmm.
We made several versions of a Christmas special, we'll call it. I wanted to do a holiday special that everybody could be invited to. Everyone gets a place at the table. So I didn't want it to be about Christmas or Hanukkah or any other specific. I wanted us to make up a holiday parallel to how we celebrate our holidays at the end of the year. So we made up this whole myth about the ice moose and all the rituals you go through to wish upon the star of the ice moose or whatever. And so it's very derivative of things like Christmas and Hanukkah, but it was a unique holiday, and its music was, and everything was. So I just thought it was a fun challenge to figure out if we could figure that out. And it's sort of like whatever traditions you and your family and your community have, you could watch, the Ice Moose episode and celebrate
Yes.
with them. So that's sort of the sentiment behind it.
Yeah, and one of my favorite episodes of PB&J is the episode "Follow Your Nose," where Peanut, Jelly, and Butter meet like the mole family.
Oh yeah, it's a great episode.
Yeah.
We had any
Yes.
show you want to talk about, I will say we had many hands on the show. It always took a lot of people to do this. I may get my position is to sort of look over the whole thing, but there were so many helpers. And that's an example of where we wanted to get into a disability without naming it that, but just there's a family, they're moles. They're probably going to have some vision issues, and we brought in advisors to help us to get that language done well and integrated into the storytelling. And it also helped it to become credited to be used in terms of teaching kids about what it's like to be with folks that have various disabilities. And it's not the only show that we tried that in. And I thought that made it really special to do that.
Right, and quickly going back to a Doug, because we forgot to mention it earlier. Another one of our previous guests is Greg Lee.
Yes.
Greg Lee,
Yes, he's wonderful.
he's
Yeah.
one of my favorite people. I miss him. We don't see each other that much because he's in LA, but
Right.
Yeah.
we always send a little "How you doing" from time to time.
Yeah, he was like, tell Jimmy I said hi.
Yes, he calls me Jimmy. Yes, and I just passed
Hey
through,
Jimmy.
so he just reached out to me.
Oh,
A spectacular person. He and his
yes.
wife Pinch, I just
Great,
adore.
great guy.
Yes.
Hey Greg, if you're watching this.
Hi,
Right.
Greg.
Yeah, I'll definitely have to email him and let him know that we spoke with you.
Yes.
Well, who could be a better mayor than Mayor White? I just think
Yeah.
that
Right?
character
Right.
is brilliantly funny. I mean, oh my gosh.
So under Cartoon Pizza, you created through that was another Disney series, Stanley. Can you talk a bit about working on that?
Yep. By now I'm loving that you're asking these questions in kind of chronological order because we had momentum now. We're a studio. We kind of are up on our feet. And Playhouse Disney, again, is a place that had a great reputation, but it needed to renew its programming and whatever. And executives from Disney would go look for possible creative properties all over the place, including a book fair, a book festival that releases the children's books globally. I think it's in Milan. That's what I think. That's what I remember. But one of the executives went over there and saw a book called Shark Mad Stanley that I thought I magically could pull that up. I might have it right here. I'm not going to leave to go get that, but he brought in the book and said, "Hey, check this out. What do you think of it?" And when you thumb through Shark Mad Stanley, it's these really beautiful, big, bold, bright color, hard defined line of these wonderful animal characters. Stanley, this little fish, and all the imagination stuff that this little guy Stanley does. So many things about it it's not just like Doug, but it's very much a kindred spirit, a similar kind of a feel. And I love this. I love the look of it. I think this is wonderful. And so Disney set up a meeting with us and the writer, creator, illustrator of the book, he goes by one name, kind of like, Madonna or Sting or whatever. Griff is his name. And we had a phone conference with him, teleconference, and met him. And he was just very chilled, laid back guy from England. And he was drawing these characters with a mouse, what? It's like some have described as drawing with a bar of soap, it's just, amazing that that's how he taught himself to draw. And so we just started developing how that show would work. And we had a lot of help and input from the Disney execs about what they wanted. But it was, had a lot of requirements to it about what they wanted to hit because it's educational. They want to teach information about animals and they want to teach key words like nocturnal is a word you're going to know if you watch that series,
Right.
But I really think that was a show that went extremely well because of all the reasons I just said. And I don't think it's playing yet. I suspect it will be released soon, but I don't think it's available yet.
Yeah, I feel like eventually Disney Plus will add it. That would be cool.
Yes.
Yeah, that'd be
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah, I'm sure they will.
Yeah. Definitely.
Yep. So another series Cartoon Pizza worked on was JoJo Circus. What are you looking for? Looking for a tape I have of JoJo Circus. It's just somewhere.
I have one in the back.
We have one somewhere in this house. Yeah, that's right, VHS tapes, folks. Back in my day, we didn't go on the internet. What was it like working on JoJo Circus?
Well, JoJo, we had heard that Playhouse Disney was looking for a movement show. That that every show had to have content, and they wanted a show that got kids up and moving. And we went, we can do that, And so we started, first of all, gathering some really talented people to develop it. And so it was David Campbell and myself, but also my wife. I was looking around to see if she was here. Lisa was a professional dancer. We met in New York City, but was a dancer, aerobics teacher, and mom of little kids. So we thought this is a great
Wow.
triple thing to bring into helping to develop it. And then we had Eric Weiner, who is just brilliant. He was the story editor on PB&J, and of course went on to do Dora the Explorer for Nickelodeon.
Yeah.
So he's a really special person, and he came on to help us. So we kicked around what it could be. The circus thing got on very quickly, but is it a guy character? It was. The answer was yes for a while. They wanted a boy lead, and so we had a character named Rolo, and then it was somebody else, Kiki, I think, and then they wanted to flip it. This is like a 3-year development period. It was a long one, and then we landed with JoJo Circus. Okay, I'm dying to tell you this though. This just happens to be the case. I'm literally pointing right there. I'm going to walk back there and bring forward what this is. I got a phone call out of the blue from a writer friend of mine in LA who worked at Disney. And she says, "Hello, Jim, you remember me?" And I'm like, yeah, what's up? And she says, "Listen, there's an executive at Disney who's cleaning house and whatever. And he says he has some of what they call the maquettes, because it was a stop motion show, meaning you have a character and you can, armature wire, you can move them frame by frame. And that's and you do single frame animation." Mm-hmm. And he said he has some of the original characters. Do you want them? And I'm like, are you kidding? Yes. So she mailed them to me. So this is just an example, but this is a actual actor, character from the show. And all that stuff they moved. Yeah. And
oh my gosh.
Wow.
What I didn't know is I thought, well, how am I going to make these stand up in my display case? And I don't know. And I put it down and it went ka-chunk. They have these amazingly strong magnets in their feet, so that they obviously on the show they have metal floors and everything, so that they just go ka-chunk and they do not move. It takes 2 hands to get these things up. But isn't that beautiful? Just the detail.
Yes, yeah, that's beautiful.
Wow.
For those listening
amazing.
on audio, Jim is holding up Croaky from JoJo Circus.
Yes.
For those listening on audio.
And there Goliath is back.
That is
wow.
awesome.
Yeah.
Wow.
One of the Spudenskis. See that potato?
Yeah, I see.
Yep. I see it.
Yeah.
So these are just a treasure, of course, to have and to be able on display. So.
Oh yeah, absolutely. It's really cool how they have like magnets on their feet, though. That's really cool.
It's a little detail, but I just wanted to share that because it's just a little behind the scenes thing about how they make it work.
Yeah.
Definitely. So kind of moving on from your work with Nickelodeon and Disney, you mentioned you also worked on some projects with Sesame Workshop. And one of the things you worked on with them was the Global Thingy segment for Sesame Street. What was that like?
Sesame, I'd worked with Sesame when it was the Children's Television Workshop on a show years before this thing you're going to have me talk about. I worked on a show called Square One TV, which was teaching mathematics to tween age kids and whatever. And that was very exciting. And I sort of ran the art department for that. for a long, long time. But spectacular people worked then. And now jump forward to when we moved in with them. Our studio was one of the floors right next to where Sesame Workshop's offices and whatever are, in the middle of Manhattan. And we were trying to figure out projects that we could do together. And I was parallel to all that setup. I'm going home to my two kids and Lisa, and trying to get there before bedtime, because my kids are going to, the rituals of bedtime are magic, just amazing. And you sing and you read books and you do whatever. And sometimes I would make up stories, and some of them were boring and didn't go anywhere, and moving along, Dad. And but every now and again you just hit it. There was something going on that captured their imagination, and they thought it was funny and whatever. And it was about a little girl named Dinky Doo. And
yes.
My wife, quicker than I did, began to hear it as, this is more going on here than just something that we'll forget about tomorrow, and started writing down some of the stories that I was telling to them. Because it was like every night they wanted to hear a new Dinky Doo story. And then just another little piece of that was, at some point I get to my studio and draw, and I went down, I was all excited, and I went to our kids, one's Rose, and I said, this is what Dinky Doo looks like. And Rose said, no, it isn't. She's like a 5-year-old, I'm like, what? And I said, really? Well, what does Dinky Doo look like? And so, Rose just starts showing me and had it, they could see it in their head, and it was where if you know the show at all, Dinky Doo looks very hand drawn and kind of a triangle that makes her dress, and all of that stuff came directly from that drawing. Rose drawing that thing with the striped socks, all these little details came from those original drawings. And Rose drew all of the characters, and then so we were drawing together.
Wow.
And then that was being put into Flash animation, is what we were using at the time. And so they figured out a program where you could take and modify the Flash, and later we were using Maya, which is a 3D program, as you know, but they were able to take that program and adapt it to where it still looked flat. Almost as though if you could go this way, they would just look like flat, like no dimension. But all of that organic way of, it was bedtime stories, it was drawing with kids, all of those things I think contributed to what made it so fun. I wanted it to be silly. I wanted it to be definitely a show that kids would laugh about. And then behind that, Sesame came in and said, well, we need an early literacy show. This is a great place. The way you tell these stories, it's a great place to teach kids fancy words, is what they were calling them. And so, flabbergasted, that kind of word would be woven into the story and shown and all that. And it sort of had this silliness going on, but it also had this content going on. And I think it made it a really strong series.
Yeah, and I'm kind of curious, because we talked to Pat Giles about this, and he didn't remember. But do you remember who was the voice of Global Thingy?
The voice of Global Thingy, that character?
Yeah.
Yeah, that was me.
Oh wow.
Really?
Wow.
Mind blown that we pitched up our voices so they would sound similar.
Right.
And so I did the Globe guy was me, and
Wow.
Pat did a bunch of different characters, and he's brilliantly funny.
Oh
I
yes.
loved
Pat
working
Giles,
with,
he's great.
he is, and I I think the
Amazing.
world of him. We just when we went, Lisa and I went to New York last year at the end of the year. We had dinner with him and some of the other from our old studio days, and just laughed and laughed and laughed. It was so great.
That's nice.
But it,
Oh,
Wonderful.
yeah.
that's awesome.
Definitely.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. But yeah, you kind of touched up on the global thingy segment. For those who don't know, that was a part of Sesame Street for a little while. What was it like working on the global thingy segment?
Thank you for asking me that question.
You're welcome.
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why. This will be one of the more serious moments of our interview.
Oh no.
No, this
Okay.
is good. This is very
Okay.
good.
Okay.
Sesame,
Oh, okay.
are the leadership there are extraordinary people, and 9/11 happened, and that rocked the whole world. But if you were in Manhattan, where those two planes, and what happened to the World Trade Tower, and watching afterwards, it is very hard for me to even talk about this because it floods back in what you heard and saw and smelled, and all of that happened, of course. But Sesame went beyond to say, what are we going to do about it? What can we say or do now? And our focus is children. And of course, the children of the world, but especially in New York, are shell shocked, traumatized, and don't understand, and all these things. What can we do? And so they put together a conference, and they brought together people that work in government. They brought in people that work in education. They brought in advisors about children and development, and then they invited me. And
Wow.
I just thought, oh yes, I want to be there. And I was sort of the wacky artist guy, I guess. I was honored to be there in such an esteemed group of people. It was an amazing weekend together. And it was really a think tank, is really the perfect way to describe it. Just everybody talking about it from their expertise. What can we do? And I, as always, while listening, I've done this all the way back to school days, I doodle. And it's just a way for me to process and hear and whatever. And so it's unconscious. You're not really paying attention to the doodle necessarily. You're listening. But this is happening. And that character, that globe that's got the feet on it and all that happened while listening to this conference, this think tank. And others were looking over my shoulder and going, wait, that's cool. There's something here. Hey, look at it started getting momentum while still there. And so when we had breakout sessions in smaller group, we were put together with other creative folks to begin to stretch it and see what could we do with this. And that was, I think, an extremely important, valuable, honorable beginning to whatever was going to happen. And Global Thingy came out of that doodle. And so we brought it back to our studio and developed it into what we have. And we wanted to tell a story that didn't require words or not many words, and we wanted to tell it in 1 minute. And so they were a challenge. That's asking a lot to get all that in, but we did. And we did, I forget how many, I'm going to guess 20 of them. And so there could be enough of them to feel like it was a repeating series that popped up in Sesame Street. And so for me, who remember the story of seeing Bert and Ernie and Sesame Street when I was in high school, to now be making these shows, Global Thingy for Sesame Street, was this incredible moment of full circle that I got to be a part of. So it's a neat memory.
Definitely.
That's wonderful. You mentioned that time in New York for during 9/11 and Sesame. One episode of Sesame I particularly remember was Elmo Visits the Firehouse from early 2002.
Yes.
Still one of the most touching episodes that Sesame's ever, and it proves, how far Sesame has come. Like it's not just a TV show. It's not just ABCs and 1, 2, 3s.
Yeah.
They are there for people.
Yeah, and
that's-
then a hurricane episode too.
The hurricane episode the season before,
Mm-hmm.
Mr. Hooper's death. That was pivotal when they aired that. Like
That was
in
amazing.
Yeah.
80,
And that-
83.
Yeah, and what I've heard about, that part where telling about that Mr. Hooper's gone, that happened
Yeah.
all that in one take.
One take.
Wow.
One take.
Did
Yeah.
not know that.
Technically speaking, they kind
We
of
learn something every day.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's looking back, it's honestly good that they did it in one take.
Oh yeah.
There was no way.
Yeah,
there was
instead
no
of,
way they
like-
could do that
Again,
with
yeah,
any
exactly.
more takes. It's been about almost 40 years this year since that episode aired in 1983. And it's still
Amazing.
talked about. It's still talked about now a lot.
Yes.
And it just proves that you can have your favorite kids shows and all that, like all these other shows, but Sesame Street is without
There's
a
something
doubt
special about that, It's just
the greatest, most influential children's television show in television history, without a doubt.
Yeah.
and still going after
And still
for
going
over 50
The show's
years.
been-
Yeah.
And I
Yeah,
feel like
it's still
Sesame
going
still
on.
needs go on for
Oh yeah.
so long.
Mhm.
Oh,
So many
absolutely.
years down the line,
absolutely. There's a lot more that children need to know about.
Right.
There's a lot more. Aside from creating various shows, you also created the direct-to-video series Hoot Dogz. That's with a Z, by the way, people. For those that don't know what that is, could you kind of describe what that is and what that was like?
Sure. Hoop Dogs was again another one of these ventures inspired by the fact that families were using home video a lot. And again to say, companies like Blockbuster and many others were booming because there were so many people that wanted to watch programming on their schedule and all this. And this is before streaming, programming was a thing. And so it seems like I was at Cartoon Pizza and I got the flu. So I was home for a few days and I just used that as an opportunity to look at some tapes that we have for our kids that I had not taken the time to look at. And one of them, well, more than one of them, a handful of them were VeggieTales. And VeggieTales,
Mm-hmm.
I had a general idea about, I'd heard stuff about, but just had not seen yet. And I watched one and just loved it. I mean, I just thought it was
Oh yeah, it's an amazing
funny,
show.
great music, great. Just I loved it. So I watched
Yes.
all of them and just came back to the studio, just rave about how much I enjoyed them and whatever. But it was sort of a way to see that there was a way you don't have to just be a Disney in order to create a brand of programming that people will want to get directly through another distribution pipeline of direct video. So that was sort of our venture into that. And we self-financed this and created content that, we felt like was funny and fun. And for slightly older kids, it was, VeggieTales is for pretty young kids. Thing we did was Hoop Dogs was for, I would say late elementary school age kids. So they're getting on, it's a little more complex storytelling and the jokes were a little more complex. But you know, it was made in sections so that you could use it, just sit down and watch the whole thing, or you could watch the special little story breakout, or this sort of music video kind of song, or whatever in pieces. So I don't know, it was sort of a very different approach than anything else we'd ever done. And I don't know, I think once again, we had a great group of people working on the show, and we did a lot. This was very hands-on. I mean, once we had it, it was basically us going around to individual distributors of this kind of content and seeing if they wanted to buy it, and going to the conventions and all of that. So it's a very different world for us. We mentioned Greg Lee. It's another chance to work with Greg. He's a big voice in it. He's one of the main characters, named Chad Dimple, and very funny, of course, character, and many others. But we made a few of those videos. But again, it's all of these things are about timing. That the home video world was changing rapidly and eventually going away, really, to be replaced by all these streaming services that you see now. Beginning with, you started hearing about Netflix, but it grew, obviously it's ballooned out into something that has gone in a lot of directions with great success. But that's sort of it in a nutshell.
And I know you also mentioned working with people like Dan Sawyer, Fred Newman, and Rich Mendoza on projects, and they were kind of like the music team. What was it like working with them on projects?
Yeah. Hey, Chris, before I answer that, I just finally start paying attention. I'm looking past you to what's on your bed.
Yes.
Thank you. That's
Yes.
I assume that's no accident, that those are some very familiar characters we've been talking about today. But thank you for that. That's pretty cool.
Yes, of course. I've had them for a couple years. Yeah, back you can see the Doug complete Nickelodeon series DVD box set that I think is now out of print. You can't get that on Amazon anymore.
Really? Oh, wow.
Really?
Yeah.
Wow.
In fact, listings of it now I think go for like $100 or something like that.
Wow.
That's
Wow.
eBay for you.
I've got one right there, over there, and I'll take better care of it. But you have some toys there that are pretty special.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
To answer your question, backing up in time to Fred Newman, when I was doing Pinwheel, Fred Newman was working on a show called Livewire. Did Mr. Bob Runkle just get on this call? I just see his face pop
Yes,
up.
He's hacked us again. Yeesh.
Hey Bob.
Once again, TJ Bob Runkle, everyone.
Yes.
Hey.
He's coming to surprise some guests on some previous interviews, and happens again with
Now
Jim
he does it
Jinkins.
again.
Yeah, I come in and hijack your call.
Again.
Wow. This just blew my mind. How are you doing?
How are you?
Great. It's great to see you and to hear you, and what a surprise.
I feel
Yes.
like I just talked to you. Oh yeah, I did.
Yeah. How are you? Well, just the same as yesterday, you know.
You're right.
Well, I'd like to start with just telling you, before we got all organized and set up and knew what we were doing, but back when Pinwheel was going on, there was a group of 3 of us from that show, Brad Williams, George James, and myself, who toured the country with a live show that promoted Pinwheel, but it also promoted Nickelodeon, which was our purpose. And we were touring everywhere. We were out about 175 days in a year. So it was, we were on a plane a lot, going everywhere. It was very exciting. But Fred Newman was the host of a show for kids called Livewire. And he too was on a touring thing where they could do live, appearances doing his show in all these various places as well. So we started seeing each other and getting to know each other on the road, really. and hanging out together, and then off he'd go this direction and we go the other. But we became great friends, Fred and I. And then Fred got a gig with the Mickey Mouse Club down in Orlando.
Mhm.
And so I went down and visited him and saw and did all that. But he was working musically in some of their comedy sketches with a guy named Dan Sawyer. And he kept telling me about this guy that's awesome and they work so well together. And so when Doug happened, skipping a few years ahead, Fred Newman was going to, I knew that he was going to help us with the mouth sounds and the character. He was Pork Chop and Mr. Dink and Skeeter and so many others. And his mouth sounds were of renown. You can't know Fred without knowing he does that. And we were looking for opportunities to make that a musical signature of Doug. And he said, well, I want to bring Dan Sawyer to work with me, which was a brilliant idea. And so they partnered up. Dan's out in LA. Fred was in New York and lived in Connecticut. And we just, made it work for them to work together on all the many of our shows. And they're brilliant, just brilliant.
Definitely.
Absolutely. They're all fantastic. So now, since we're getting close to wrapping up soon, to anyone watching or listening, what would you like to say to those who have been supporting you throughout your career over the years?
Well, wow, these are big, expansive questions. I think that it's an understatement to say that we are nothing without their support, of course. And I get the chance through the years to meet people all sorts of places. I need to wear a hat just to keep the sun off of my head, so I wear this hat. And it's special. It's a Doug hat that is special to me because of it. But it's also a way of creating conversation with people that you don't know, because they might notice it. And now they've grown up. They're like in their 20s and 30s with kids of their own. But they go,
Yeah.
I love that show, and let's talk about it. So we've had many, many years now to talk about the shows and what they meant to them and whatever. And that's an extraordinary connection to a lot of people. And I'm honored to have been able to do that and be a part of that. And of course, their comments inform how I tell stories moving forward. But yeah, they are part of the process. Hearing about kids and parents and what they care about and how they are is everything in terms of how we tell our stories.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
So if people would like to connect with you, where can people find you?
Well, wow, what a great question. Let's see.
You really need a website, Jim.
I know there is. I'll say this one and see if it's of interest. Because this just began. There is an Instagram location called Real Jim Jinkins that this just started, and you'll notice that when you get to it, it's in its. I think there's a lot more that's getting ready to come. We leave on Monday, Lisa and I, to go to the place where this is being created and made and put together and all that, to talk about what we want to do. But it's called Real Jim Jinkins because it's trying to say I'm directly involved, and I'll hopefully along the way make comments, and I'm digging deep for behind the scenes stuff that no one's ever seen before and putting that up. And some of those single panel cartoons I told you about that I used to draw, they're on there now. So that's one suggestion, that you can go there and see stuff. And it's a place we're trying to set up as a forum where I can directly talk to folks. So we'll see how that goes, but that's up and going.
Nice. And links to that will be in the description down below for people to connect.
Yes.
Yes. So the last question that Matt's about to ask or Marty, depending on who wants to take it, is the question that we ask all of our guests at the end. Go ahead.
You haven't asked us in a while, Marty. You want to? I'd be happy to. Thank you for asking. So, this, again, as Chris said, this is the question we usually save for last. We always ask this to every guest, pretty much. Of course, this podcast is called Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show. Thank you. When you think of nostalgia, what do you think of? Or, in your own words, how would you define the word nostalgia?
Well, I'll tell you what happened when you just said that. My mind is opened a floodgate of the images, and by images I mean cartoons and TV shows and movies from when I was a kid. And the ones that stick with you, mostly, some of them are just silly and goofy and whatever, but a lot of them run deeper than that and capture your imagination and make you want to see more and whatever. But I just think about all those cartoons from those days, everything from Rocky and Bullwinkle, kind of when you get a little older and realize the levels that those jokes are playing on, it's sort of mind-blowing and hilarious. And of course, Bugs Bunny, all the Warner Brothers cartoons are we just thought that's the funniest things we've ever seen. And I still feel that way, that they were truly hitting on some universal stuff that we all think are funny or important or whatever. And a zillion other shows mostly made for kids and whatever. I just loved having stories told to me and being able to be a part of that. And to me, those are the things that are, I'm getting at examples of what nostalgia is for me. It's happy, fond memories of storytelling from years before, from when you're a kid. So I don't know.
Definitely great word to end on.
For being on, Jim, it's a blast.
Yeah, so
and
absolutely had a wonderful time catching up with you too. It's been
Yes, I'm glad for you seeing Bob again.
Thank you, Bob, for starting all this.
Yes,
and then you have to deal with me.
I know.
and as always, thank you very much, for what you've done over the years, to be a part, where you work has done, be a part of our lives, and keep up the great work. And cannot wait what's next if you're in store down the line, Jim.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes.
Great
Of
fun.
course.
Yes,
I
and
wish you well.
Absolutely.
Yes, and to all our viewers and listeners,
Likewise.
we absolutely enjoyed our time with Jim Jinkins. Keep a
Yes,
lookout for
absolutely.
wonderful interviews. And what do we say, Jake?
Keep nostalgia alive. Take care, everyone. See you next time for amazing, wonderful episodes coming your way. And keep your eye out for that. Until then, see you next time. Take care. Bye.
Thank you for tuning in to another wonderful Jake's Happy Nostalgia Show interview. Be sure to follow Jake and the crew on social media and stream the show wherever you find your favorite podcasts. And as always, remember to keep nostalgia alive. Bye-bye.